Welcome to Draper University, guys, or Hero City. It's an honor to host Jason here. This is something that I've been trying to put together for about 4 years. He never said no. He always said not yet. And now he's here. So thank you so much for being here. And so Jason has actually written an amazing book called Angel that we kind of got our hands on early. It's an amazing book to read for entrepreneurs because it kind of gives you a very good insight into the mind of an angel. And most of the questions I'm going to ask Jason are based off of his experiences and things in the book. How do you be who you want to be in this world today where everything you say as an investor or as an entrepreneur is scrutinized, and you have like something like the future like Uber waiting for you to happen where you can get kicked out. So what do you do?
Well, there are a lot of changes going on in the world that are very positive. Mm-hmm. And so I feel very good about society. I feel very positive about society. If you look at tolerance for gay marriage, if you look at tolerance for cannabis and some other things, the approval of these things has gone through the roof, and the people disapproving has changed in our lifetime. So I feel like society is trending towards a very beautiful place. In fact, violence and the chances of being murdered in our country has gone down precipitously, and in fact the world. Abject poverty is going down massively thanks to Bill Gates and a bunch of other people. Infant mortality, all of these things are trending in the right direction, but it feels kind of bad because we have a media that obsesses about all the bad things, and then we also have this social media culture where if somebody makes a mistake or says something, in an imperfect way, people really jump on them and try to ruin their lives. And the mob mentality we have today, I don't think is particularly helpful. I think you got to give people a little bit of leeway and a little bit of forgiveness if they make a mistake. I certainly do. I had a NPR reporter call me a derogatory word, and she's like, "I really thought you were going to be a beep when I read your book, and when I heard who you were. But I find you quite charming and engaging." And I said, and then the other NPR reporter in the room goes, like, "Oh my God." And the woman goes, "I'm sorry, did I just call you that? I'm so sorry." And she thought I was going to tweet it, where it was a recorded interview. Mm-hmm. And then we had a break, and then she came back and she says, "I just want to formally apologize. I said something inappropriate." And I said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to tweet it or anything." I mean, I'll tell the story here. But I'm not mentioning the name where there's a million NPR shows. And I said, "Listen, if you said something and it was from the hip and you speak for 3 or 4 hours a day as a radio personality and you say something that wasn't optimal, I don't think you should lose your career over it." And it was a career-ending type thing, she said. Mm-hmm. Like, I think actually literally she would have been suspended or fired by NPR. And I said, I don't judge you on that. Let's just delete it from the tape. Let's move on. And we'll all have a beer someday and laugh about it, or have a coffee and laugh about it. It's not the end of the world. You said something that was slightly inappropriate, but let's all move on. That being said, we live in a very specific time where people need to, I think, act with a very high bar as leaders. And there is no room for mistakes. Right. And so I encourage people to act at the highest levels of morality and ethics, and to not do anything inappropriate, ever. And if you're looking for a spouse or somebody to date, that would be something best reserved for Tinder or other applications or websites, not the place where you're employed or the place where you're the founder. So, we live in a different time. Things are changing. I think they're changing for the better. Mm-hmm. And I overall feel very positive about society. Although there are still challenges and there are still examples of injustice in the world. It's really fantastic to see so many more female founders, so many more underrepresented minorities in the industry. And in fact, we're working really hard at launch, my team, we have 9 people there, to do things like Female Founder University, which will take place in the second week of July. It's free, it's 2 days. We do it over at Wilson Sonsini. And it's basically our incubator in 2 days. And we decided we wanted to increase the number of female founders that were pitching us and coming to our incubator and that we're investing in. So we said, let's just run an event where we do something for free that is super helpful. And so we try to do these super helpful events, like the founder.university, And we decided to just do one that was all female. And the last one we did was about a third female, and now we're going to have 35 women. And it just increases our ability to find great people to invest in, right? And so I think I judge people based on their actions and how they deal with bad situations. Bad situations are going to happen. Unfortunate situations will happen. I think the real judge of leadership is how you respond to them. Right. And so in the example of Uber, obviously I'm not pleased as an investor with some of the things that happened, but I was very pleased that they hired Eric Holder. I was very pleased that they really took a lot of serious action to try to change the situation. I mean, this is the most severe situation I've ever seen occur in 25 years in technology, where people took incredible action to try to solve problems. Does it forgive the problems? I guess not. And should people be upset about it? I think rightfully so. But I, as an investor and as somebody who's seen this before many times, if Eric Holder went into Google or Facebook and did the kind of diligence, instead of 20 instances, it would be 200. Yeah. Anytime you have a large group of people, whether it's Coachella or a company or anywhere, there are going to be instances that happen. It's how you respond to them. Right. And the culture you set. And I think that's some things that could have been definitely done better. And I feel like our industry is now, I think we're becoming leaders in how to operate in a just and fair way. Right. And it's painful, and there's going to be some trials and tribulations as we get there. But when you compare how open our industry is, say compared to Hollywood or the financial industry, I think we're light speed ahead. So as critical as we are of each other in this industry, as hard as it may seem to read some of the headlines, I feel like we're outpacing almost every other industry in terms of being a just, fair environment for everybody. And I think we all have a part to play in it, and we're working really hard at my company at it and many other companies. So I feel ultimately very positive about what's happening in our industry and in fact the world.
Thank you. So on that note, I've actually never had to pay as a female founder or anything for any launch events. I always apply and I've always gotten a free ticket, whereas it hasn't happened for a lot of other people. So
well, the interesting thing
this is even before the conversation started. So this is like from 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, starting about 5 or 6 years ago, we said, how open can we make our events? And we made the launch festival free for founders. Has anybody been to a launch event? Raise your hand if you have. And keep your hand up if you got your ticket for free. So everybody had their ticket for free. Great. So, and it was about 20% of the audience, I think. We decided if our event, Launch Festival, the tickets were free, and if we didn't charge people to be on stage, and we gave them a free demo table, and we give 250 startups a table, we let 250 startups present on 2 different stages, we would get a great representation. It turned out, actually, we didn't. We had about 10% female in the audience. So we were struggling, how do we get the ratio in the audience up? And it's free tickets, so we kind of felt like, on one hand, there were people inside of our companies like, well, we gave free tickets away. If that's the ratio, that's the ratio. But we said, well, what can we do to change the ratio? And Jackie, who is the executive producer of This Week in Startups and has 4 Emmy Awards, Emmy Award-winning producer Jackie, she said, why don't we email the 10% who are female and ask them if they know any female founders who want to come? We went from 10% to 15 to 20 to 25 to 30. And every time another 100 women would sign up, we'd email them. Do you know any female founders? It turns out the female founders know the other female founders. And we just started increasing the ratio. So there are very practical things we can do in our industry to really change the ratio and make it even more open and fair and just.
Amazing. So on that note, what are some of the things that you think, so as an investor, what are some of the things that you're working on to balance that diversity yet merit
Sure.
democracy, for example?
So we have a very specific zone in which we like to invest. We call it the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold. Just right, right? We want the porridge just right. And it turns out, if we just go with that group of people, we may not see the numbers and representation we want. And what we're looking for is, you haven't gotten your Series A yet, and you have a product in market with a little bit of traction. Right. How many people have a Series A investment? Raise your hand if you do, nice and high. Nobody in the room. How many people have a product in the market? How many people have actual product in the market? It's about half. How many people are having customers or a product in the market? Raise your hand. And that's the other half, right? So we're interested in the people who have a product in the market and who have a little bit of traction, right? and because we think we can help them get to that Series A. But now for the other half, there are other incubators that they should work with who work with people who are having their product in the market. We specialize in growth techniques. In order to deploy the growth techniques, you have to have a product we can put the growth techniques against. So what we said was, well, let's create other products and services for those people. The Launch Festival is open to everybody, and anybody can come. That's our product or service, and This Week in Startups, and the Launch Ticker. These are products and services to draw in people who are not in our investment thesis yet. And then we said, well, we want to get even closer to them, so let's do Founder University, and let's do Angel University, and create a specific event so we can meet more angel investors and even train them to be better angel investors. And let's have this Founder University where we can spend 2 days with people who are right before the Goldilocks zone. So they're kind of like just about to have their product launched in some cases, or maybe they just had their product out for 30 days. And we can tell them, hey, here's when we invest. So one of the important things to know as a founder is when to approach investors. Right. The worst thing you can do is get a list of 200 investors and then do a mail merge. We know it when we get the email. It's a terrible approach. What you need to do is research the investor for an hour or two, watch their interview on This Week in Startups or some other podcast, read their blog, read their social media, start to understand who they are, what they've invested in, and what appeals to them. And then contact them when you're in the right zone. There are people who love design, and so emailing Kevin Rose a beautifully designed mock-up, even if it's not a functional prototype, is a great idea. There are other people who maybe are very much into engagement and who care about metrics. Maybe the folks at Social Capital are very engagement-oriented. So you wouldn't send them a mock-up. You would send them, here are the first 1,000 people who used our products, and here are the cohorts, and in this cohort, we see an engagement level in 7 times a day, people are using it. Right. You have to know your audience. And what I find with a lot of entrepreneurs is they're emailing and saying, hey, Social Capital, Sequoia, Bill Gurley at Benchmark, can we have coffee? I want to talk to you about my idea. Hello. That's not what they do. If you want to get coffee and you want to just talk about your ideas, do that with a founder. Mm-hmm. Do that with another founder. But really what we're all trying to do as investors, and listen, I spent most of my time as an entrepreneur and 5 years as an investor, we're trying to sort out people into buckets. Right. And one of the big buckets is people who talk about doing a startup. Mm-hmm. And some of them are tourists, and some of them are actually entrepreneurs who are going to build great products. But in my estimation, 90 to 95% of the people are talkers, and they'll never get their product to market. So then as investors, we just look for people who are part of that 10% group that actually can get a product to market. Because now we've eliminated 9 out of 10 founders, or 9 out of 10 tourists, and we separated the one founder who can get a product to market and can build a prototype. And those are the folks that you really want to engage with. So as entrepreneurs, if you have ideas, if you have a business plan, unless it's explicitly a business plan competition, do not start contacting entrepreneurs. Find 2 or 3 people, one person who's a designer, one person who's a developer, one person who's got a really good business brain for business models or can build a deck or is a sales executive. And once you have that team of 3 or 4 Avengers, right, and you got your super team, the Defenders, the Avengers, the Justice League, pick your metaphor, pick your team. You want to then build something that when you show it to people, they go, this is a group who will build something. Mm-hmm. And they can make progress on their product without money. The people you really want to invest in my opinion, are people who are able to build product and move the product forward without writing checks. Or who can take a nickel and turn it into $1, or a dime and turn it into a $5 bill. Right. People who are massively capital efficient. That's why Y Combinator had a rule in the early days. They would only accept multiple founders and only developers. And people were like, well, that's kind of BS. Like Airbnb wasn't a developer, it was a designer, right? And so it's a little bit unfair, but I think in the early days, they were writing very small checks, $16,000, right? And they knew it wasn't enough to take that $16,000 that they were investing for 6% and say, go get hire developers who cost $100,000 a year. You would have them for 16% of a year, 1 month. Maybe for 6 weeks you could get them. So they said, just make sure you are a developer yourself. So people who do sweat equity, people who are bootstrapped, those are the people that separate themselves and have a higher likelihood. I've seen people, and I've invested in people who you invest $250 or $500, they take the $250,000 check, They give $50,000 to a design firm, $100,000 to a developer, $50,000 to a PR firm, and then they wire themselves $50,000 for living expenses, and it's gone.
Right.
And then they just threw a bunch of gasoline and kerosene on a log. They lit it on fire. Now they have a charred log. The better approach is to have kindling, just small pieces of wood, some coals, and build up that hot fire. That hot fire is your skills. Right. And the number one skill in the 21st century is the ability to acquire skills. And so many people are designers, and you say, oh, okay, you need to do some front-end work. And they go, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. Okay, well, you learned how to use Photoshop and Illustrator, and you learned how to be a designer. And now your knowledge stops. There's a hard line where your brain is not capable of learning front-end development on Treehouse or Lynda or any of the free courses or Coursera or anything online that's $20 a month. Why? You know, like if you really want to have a go at it as a founder, you're going to need to be able to acquire a large group of skills and be able to use your own enthusiasm and effort to push things forward, even when you haven't done it before. So when I meet people, a lot of young people, a lot of millennials, not the people in this room, this is a self-selecting group who decided to come to a talk by an angel investor at Draper University. But I talk to a lot of millennials, and you probably have friends who are talking about their ideas. They think they have some great skill in the world, and you're like, what's your skill? And it's like, I'm an idea person. That's like saying, like, I have a heartbeat, you know, like, I'm breathing. Oh, your skill is breathing. Oxygen, wow. Your parents must be so proud. That's not a skill, you know? Like, when I started my first magazine in the 90s, I learned how to use PageMaker. I learned how to write. I was a terrible writer, but I got a little better every year. I took pictures. I bought a nice Carl Zeiss lens camera. I learned how to sell the ads, and I learned a little bit of graphic design. I learned how to make a logo. I learned how to do distribution. I learned every aspect of doing a magazine, and I was probably, you know, a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 on each of these skills. But at least I could, by sheer force of will, make a 16-page photocopy and take it places and say, here's my magazine. And Fred Wilson and other people would look at it and go, this is 1995. That's a magazine? I'd say, yep, it's a magazine. And they go, that kind of looks like a photocopy with 2 staples on it. I'm like, yes, but I put a full-page image on the cover. Therefore, it's a magazine. I was delusional, but it was quite charming to people. They're like, oh my God, you wrote 8 stories, and your byline is 7 of them. And I used to put a joke on the masthead. Jason McCabe Calacanis, editor, photographer, delivery boy, ad sales. And I was considered a bit of a joke in Silicon Valley in the early days, because once I printed the magazine, I had no way to get it to people. So I would take a luggage rack, I would put 300 copies of the magazine on it, and I would walk to Razorfish, to DoubleClick, to Pseudo, and I'd stop, I'd knock at the door and say, hey, I'm delivering Silicon Valley Reporter. And they'd say, what's that? I'd say, it's my magazine about the internet, you're in it. They'd say, oh, that's cool. I'd say, great. Can I meet the CEO of the company? And the receptionist would be like, do you have a meeting? I'm like, no. But I'm writing a magazine. Maybe I'll write a story about them. They'd be like, no, you can't meet the CEO. I was like, okay, can I leave some magazines? They're like, fine. So I'd leave 10 copies of the magazine, and I would just drop the magazine off everywhere I went. And eventually, I would drop off the magazine, and 8 people would come out and want to talk to me. PR person, the CEO, everybody would be in the lobby like, Jason Calacanis is here with the magazines, wearing a Silicon Valley Reporter t-shirt. And I was so clueless at the time that I didn't realize that I looked like an idiot. But it was charming to people that like I was living the brand. Right. And that I was so desperate to make it successful that I didn't have the money to spend $20 on UPS to send 20 different people. I didn't have the $400. So I said to myself, well, I can do 20 deliveries in a day. That saves $400. Right. And the level of entitlement I see amongst entrepreneurs in peak markets like we have today is just absurd. Right. They're like, I don't know how to do PR, I gotta hire a PR firm. You really have to hire a PR firm. Really? You haven't finished your product and you wanna spend $10,000 a month on a PR firm? I have an idea for you. Why don't you look for all the people who've discussed your competitors, make a spreadsheet of 20 email addresses, follow them on Twitter, like what they're tweeting, write a blog post that links to their recent story, name drop them, do that for 2 months, and then email them and say you have a new feature coming, you would love to meet them for coffee, or send them a screenshot of it if they're interested, and you're the CEO and you just got $100K in funding from Draper. And just do the work yourself.
So on that note, when you're doing yourself, you also have a very interesting formula in your book which kind of defines the opportunity cost of doing everything yourself. So would you elaborate a bit more on that? Like, when is
Sure.
it not worth doing all this work yourself?
It's very simple. If you look at the time, you just say, what could I have accomplished? So in the case of PR firms are notoriously expensive and notoriously ineffective. They cost $5,000, $10,000 a month. Let's say you got the easy end of the price range. You got $5,000 a month, and they said it's a 4-month minimum, $20,000. You say to yourself, okay, I could do this all in 10 hours of work, 5 hours of reading, finding 50 names, emailing those people, putting it in outreach, sending a follow-up message 2 times, doing a little mail script, and that would take me another 5 hours. And then at that point, I have to meet with the top 5 of them, but I would have had to do that anyway. So it's 10 hours of work for $20,000. That's $200 an hour. Now, if you have $20 million in the bank, you've raised your Series B, by all means, $5,000 a month. It's $60,000 a year. It seems pretty de minimis. If you could, in that same amount of time, close an angel round of $2 million, okay, maybe it's worth it to hire the PR firm. If you have $40,000 left in the bank, to spend that half of your money on that, probably not a great idea.
Right.
And if you are watching 20 hours of television a week, the average American watches 4 hours a night. TV's so amazing. I mean, how many people watch The Walking Dead? Raise your hand if you watch The Walking Dead. How many? Keep your hand. Okay. If you watch The Walking Dead, Game of Thrones, or NBA games, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Be honest now. Okay, it's about 2/3 of the audience. Stop watching television. Okay? I don't care how good the Warriors are. I don't care how good Game of Thrones is, and I don't care how good The Walking Dead is. Anybody here worth $100 million? Anybody here have a successful company that went public? Raise your hand if your company's gone public yet. I don't want to see anybody in here watching any TV until your company's public. When your company goes public and you take down $100 million, you can start watching TV again. Until then, you have no business watching TV. I'm sorry to be your parents. I'm sorry to break the news to you. But if you want to be successful, enough with The Walking Dead. You watching that Walking Dead?
I haven't watched
Don't you lie to
in
me.
10 years.
Okay, in 10 years. That's why you're sitting in this chair. Okay? No more with the TV. All right? You want to go for a run or a hike? Yes, I'll allow it. But enough with the TV. And with
It's actually not that hard to give up.
Listen,
It depends, but
we had 2/3 of the folks here with those 3 names raise their hand. I know what the commitment is to watch those things. Now, I'm not saying you have to give up your life, but I will tell you that Zuckerberg did, and Elon did, and Travis did. So if you want to have an outsized success, are you putting an outsized effort? And if you're watching a bunch of these amazing TV shows, the fact is you're not putting the effort in. And 2/3 of the people put up their hands. The other 1/3 are lying. They're definitely watching that Game of Thrones. I mean, it's incredible. It's like that show's unbelievable. But that's my point. There's a major temptation, and people are inefficient. They waste their time on a lot of silly stuff. The fact is, you got to be focused on your skills. Think about, how if you watched all 5 seasons of Game of Thrones and you spent 60 hours on that, you would know how to be a front-end developer. You would know JavaScript. You would know Photoshop. You would understand how to be a sales executive. If you want to watch something, watch This Week in Startups. At least you're learning, okay? Or watch Tim Ferriss's podcast or something, Kevin Rose's, where you're learning about building product. Myself, I watch a little bit of TV now, but for the first 20 years of my career when I was coming up, I hadn't have time for nonsense. I specifically did not waste my time doing that. I did not go out drinking. I did not go to parties. I focused on my work and my skills. That's why I did okay. You have to be willing to sacrifice. And I find people do not want to sacrifice anymore. They want to go to Summit at Sea and TEDx and Web Summit and all this nonsense. And they want to spend $5,000 or $10,000 on it. If you're wasting your time on Coachella or Summit at Sea or whatever, and your company's not profitable, you're doing it wrong. Until your company's wildly profitable and you've got 2 years of runway in your bank, enough with the conferences. I mean, if you get a free ticket or let's say it's a conference where you're going to meet customers, so if you're in the legal field and there's a law conference, yeah, by all means, go to it. But I find people are wasting a lot of time, very inefficient with their time. Now, if you're young and you don't have kids, you can be a little bit inefficient. As you get older, you don't even have the opportunity to be inefficient, but as young people, if you really want to be successful, and I've seen the people who are successful, they are obsessed. They have an unhealthy obsession with their own skills and performance and ability. And they're not wasting time on nonsense. So just look at your schedule and look at yourself with a critical eye, like if you're the coach, and say to yourself, if I was coaching myself, what would I tell myself not to do? And what are the things I'm procrastinating on? I can't tell you how many founders who know exactly what they need to work on, and they sit there in their email box playing defense all day, responding to bullshit. Enough with the email. You know what it takes. It takes talking to your customers. I have people in my portfolio, I talk to them, they're doing everything but talking to their customers. I'm like, well, what do your customers say? They're like, we're scared of talking to our customers. They may not like our product. I'm like, if that's your sense, you really need to talk to them now and find out exactly how much they hate your product so that you can then say, okay, you hate our product. Is there something that you're very frustrated with in your life as a barista, as an accountant, as a sales executive, as an IT specialist, whatever, because we want to build something for you. The number of people who don't talk to their customers is insane to me.
Oh, it is.
Cardinal rule of entrepreneurship, talk to your customers.
No, I totally agree. Your time and your mind are the only two things you truly have, and that's it. You waste them and that's gone. So for those of you who are watching Silicon Valley on Friday or Saturday,
There's an argument to be made that shows you what not to do. There are some things in that, it's scary how accurate it is. I mean, it's about 84% accurate right now. They came to my poker game. I've talked to some of the people who write on it. Like, they're like, hey, tell us the craziest things that have ever happened. I'm like, absolutely not, because I've seen some crazy stuff. Like, no, thank you. But
no, thank you.
Yeah, they've gotten a couple digs at me on the show, I understand. I'm just too unaware of them. But you remember the guy who runs the incubator? What's his name? He's no longer on the show now. Ehrlich. You remember Ehrlich did the Hawaiian party and he was saying mahalo over and over?
I don't watch TV.
Everybody remember that? Well, I had a startup, Mahalo, which is now Inside. Supposedly that was a dig to me. It was like, let's make his startup a Hawaiian themed party, and he keeps saying mahalo over and over again to kind of stick it to Jason's biggest failure in life. Well played.
What was it?
Well played.
What is your biggest failure in life?
My biggest failure? Well, there's so many. Where to begin? 9 out of 10 of the startups I invest in either return 0 or 1x their money. So objectively looking at my angel portfolio of 125 investments, I'm going to guess 110 will be 0. But 6 of them are unicorns right now. I just found out in the last 60 days that 3 more companies I invested in turned into unicorns. So I've got a 1 in 21 hit rate. It's kind of never happened, I think, in the history of Silicon Valley. There might be Chris Sacca and Ron Conway are the only 2 people ahead of me, maybe Esther Dyson too. So I'm objectively number 5, maybe 6 in terms of best angel investors of all time. The difference is everybody else has quit and they're no longer doing it. And I'm doubling down and going harder. Right. So I think I have a chance to be number 1, and that's what I'm working on. That's why I wrote the book. The book was my way of saying, I have some level of expertise on this after 125 investments and a ton of mistakes. I'm going to share every secret I know. And it really is for founders too to understand how angels make decisions and how to behave and how to really hack the system. So there's a couple of chapters in there that are targeted at entrepreneurs. But really, if 100,000 people read the book, which might be realistic, and 10,000 of them try angel investing, and 1,000 of them start doing it for a living, can you imagine my deal flow? And what if one of them sends me a unicorn, or every year somebody sends me a unicorn? Yum, yum. So the whole book is a front to inspire people to become wealthy, powerful angel investors to increase my deal flow.
And scouts. Why not?
And scouts, exactly. Well, the truth is, if you think about how wealth is created, how many people here are over the age of 30, like me? Raise your hand if you're over the age of 30. Raise your hand if you're under the age of 30. Okay, so you didn't lie. Okay. So it's about, for people who are watching, it's 80% millennials and 20% people who are not millennials. The millennials grew up at the tail end of a great lie. And the Gen Xers, we were fed something that was true that then became not true, which is wealth is created by having a white-collar job and buying a home. How many people heard that story? Raise your hand if you heard the story. Like, get a white-collar job and try to buy a home, and that's how you get rich. It's not true anymore. Because to get a white-collar job, you have to go to college and get debt. Now you're 100K in debt or 200K in debt. And then you graduate, and the average income for two people here in Silicon Valley or two people in New York or Austin or anywhere in the country might be what? 125K household income? Maybe if you're doing amazing, 200K. When our parents grew up in the 70s and 80s, the cost of a home was 1.5 to 2 times, 1 to 2 times, actually in some places it was 1 times, your household income. In other words, in today's world, if you had 125 to 150K in household income, a house would cost 125 to 250K. Anybody see a $150,000 house in Silicon Valley? Can anybody in here on their salary afford a home in Silicon Valley? Raise your hand if you can. Nobody's hands are raising. The dream is over. There is no way for you to use that hack. That hack is what our parents used. Many of our parents bought their houses for $70,000 and they're now worth $1 million, right? And now it's over. You're coming out of school with 100K in debt. It takes you to your 35 to pay it down. And your income is 1/10 of what it costs to buy a home. That is no longer available to anybody, or almost anybody. Maybe if you work at Google on some rare technology and they give you $500,000 a year and your spouse has a similar situation and you have $1 million, then 1 times the cost or 2 times the cost of your household income would be $2 million. It actually would be possible. And that's why the only people who live in Palo Alto right now are Googlers and people at Facebook, because they probably have 500,000 RSUs. And they probably think, well, I mean, it sucks to buy a $3 million house or $4 million house, but we can swing it. Right. It's just the American dream's over. Now we add to the American dream that all the white-collar jobs in the world are going to be attacked by AI and machine learning. So I'll ask another question. How many people in this room have a job that they would consider harder, your job is harder, than beating Garry Kasparov at chess? Whose job is harder than beating Garry Kasparov at chess? Your job is. Okay, 1 person. So I guess he wrestles bears for a living or something. He's a bear wrangler. But the truth is, only 1 person. Now, is your job harder than beating the 5 best Go players in the world in a game of Go? Top 5 Go players. So he says no. Okay, so somewhere between Kasparov and 5 Go players, we'll find out your job afterwards. I really want to know. So anyway, nobody in the room's job is harder than beating the top 5 Go players. Well, guess what? Google beat them with AI. And we beat Kasparov, whatever, a decade ago, and we're beating poker players and the best poker players in the world. AI, when focused on one vertical, will win. Right. And it's just a matter of time before they focus on accounting, legal. I've seen 6 or 7 startups focus specifically on contracts and legal. So I think half the legal work is going to be done by machine learning in another 10 years. And how many people here know people who got their law degrees and couldn't find a great job? We all know somebody like that, right? Or you're that person, right? No. You suffered through it. But it's true. So what do we think is going to happen next 10 years? Okay, now let's add to it the fact that 30 million people in this country work in retail or driving a car. McDonald's just put in self-serve kiosks, Pizza, self-serve kiosks, Panera Bread, self-serve kiosks. Anybody here think that the idea that a person hitting buttons and collecting money at a register is going to be a job that exists in 10 or 15 years? Okay, so we're all fucked. This is a very dark, dark view of the world. Not only are the 30 million retail and driving jobs going to, let's say 80% of them go away, half of them go away. We're going to have 15 million Americans, 5% of the country, and essentially 10% of adults are going to be out of work already compared to how many people are out of work. And white-collar jobs are going to start going. Right. Okay, so how are we all going to survive? Where is the opportunity to move from poor to middle class, or poor to wealthy, or middle class to wealthy, or wealthy to ultra wealthy? Well, you don't have to worry about wealthy to ultra wealthy because the entire system in America is rigged for the wealthy to become ultra wealthy. Capital gains tax, LLCs, Donald Trump as president. I mean, it's just listen, it's the biggest disaster in the world. I was discussing it with my wife and I was like, oh my God, do you realize how little in taxes we're going to be paying? This is horrible. Like, we're going to save a lot of money, and then there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering. and people can't go to the doctor, and we're going to get rid of preschool. I mean, we're getting rid of so many important things. It's disgusting. It's horrible. And it's at the exact time when all of these, AI jobs and automation are going to be happening, which is a very crazy time. I believe that the hack that will get people into the ability to move from poor to rich, from middle class to rich, and to have bounty in life is to be on the cap table of high growth startups. Right. I believe in my heart that if you had $100,000 to invest, doing it in, or some percentage of it in high growth startups would be worth doing it. Because let's say you put 5 or 10% of your net worth into this, and you lose it, or you lose half of it. If you lose all of it, you lose 5 or 10% of your worth. And if that's, let's say, $100,000, if you had $1 million in savings, and you lost 100,000, 10% of it, you wouldn't be destitute. You'd be bummed, but you wouldn't be destitute. And you will have invested in 30 companies, 25 or 30 companies, and you'll learn something and you'll have networked. If you lose half of it, you'll be networked, you'll be, bummed, but not super bummed. But what if you hit Uber or Airbnb or Google or Facebook or even 100xer, and all of a sudden, you 10x your money. Right. Now you've doubled your net worth, and now you're starting to have escape velocity. And one very interesting thing's happened. Non-accredited investing, which is 96% of the country, just got passed, right? So we see Republic and Seed Invest are doing non-accredited investor fundraising. I think this is going to change the world. And everybody's saying it's not, and it's going to be like the worst companies, and it may be the worst companies right now, or it may be the companies where it's the funding of last resort, some cases. I don't think it's all cases. But this is the same thing people told me when I started my syndicate on AngelList. Right. I moved it to Jason's syndicate now, which is no dig to AngelList. I just wanted all the carry for myself. And I don't need that platform. We have so much reach. But I really believe in syndicating my best deal flow to everybody. So I really hope that the founders I work with will consider emailing their entire list of customers and their friends and family and saying, hey, we're going to put $1 million available to the public in the next Uber, Thumbtack, Robinhood, Desktop Metal, DataStax, or Wealthfront. I would love to see those companies, when they're raising their first $10 million, allocate $2 million of it to the public at $100 to $500. How many people here knew in the first year of using Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Uber, or Airbnb that these would be significant companies? How many people knew those would be significant companies? Raise your hand if you thought this is a pretty cool company. It's like maybe 25% of the audience knew those were going to be significant companies. In year 2, how many people knew in year 2 of LinkedIn or Uber, Airbnb, or Facebook that they would be significant companies? Raise your hand nice and high. So now we're up at half. Okay, those companies went public in year 5, 6, or 7. So in the first 2 years, half the audience would have made a bet on one of those. My mom knew that Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn were going to be great companies. She's into it, but I mean, she's not like here every day. She's in Brooklyn. Why can't Americans invest in these companies early on? Right. Well, it was because of some antiquated legislation that the SEC has now changed. And we're going to see one of these companies will be brave enough to do it. Some founder will be brave enough to do it with a high quality company with serious revenue. And we might see, 1,000 Americans put $1,000 in each. And I'm talking about teachers and garbage men and firefighters and just, salt of the earth, blue collar people put $1,000 into a company or $500 in a company and have it go 1,000x, right, and get back $500,000 or $1 million and be able to buy a house again, right? And
it comes full circle.
That's why I wrote the book. Honestly, I think I didn't have to write the book. It was an opportunity cost for me to write it. I could have been investing in startups during that time. But I just thought, I figured something out. And although life is a zero-sum game in many ways, angel investing happens to be one unique place where collaboration is critical and virtuous. I've never met a startup that didn't have a dozen investors in the first couple years. Right. And typically they have 2 or 3 dozen on the cap table by year 3. It is a collaborative sport. Even myself, Chris Sacca, Cy Bannister, we don't have the ability, nor do we want to be the entire round. We want to have multiple investors involved because multiple people bring more skills to the table. And that's what we're going for. So with the book, I'm just hoping to inspire some number of people and help them get rich, help them move from the middle class to the upper class. I'm not worried about wealthy to ultra wealthy. That's going to happen. I mean, if you just put your money in the stock market and you collect capital gains and dividends, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
We have a real problem in America right now of going from poor to middle class, and from middle class to wealthy. It was really good for a couple of generations, but then we decided to add capital gains and a bunch of, lower the tax rate for the ultra wealthy, while claiming that the ultra wealthy are paying more in taxes. They're paying more in a total dollar amount. They're paying less than they ever had.
Right.
So it's all a lie. And Trump is continuing that lie to an absurd basis. I mean, he's telling everybody that his health care is going to be better. It's a bold-faced lie. He's telling everybody he's going to reduce the budget, he's going to spend more, and he's giving people huge tax breaks who don't want or need it.
Right.
People who are affluent in this country are scared to death right now of a coming revolution based upon the polarization of wealth. It's too easy on the wealthy in this country. They're not doing their fair share. And that's why they're all taking the giving pledge, because they're scared to death that this is going to turn into Marie Antoinette. I mean, they're going to be coming with the guillotines for the rich. Right. Operation Wall Street was an example. It was kind of like the dry run of how upset people are at the polarization of wealth in this country. It is completely unfair that we're fighting against a basic minimum wage while at the same time giving tax cuts. And we're so rich, this country is so rich, we have so much money, and we can't provide health care for everybody. It makes no sense. Tiny countries with less resources than us are doing it, and we can't? For what reason?
Right.
Because of some political battle? I mean, these are human beings who are suffering, and we want to take away childcare. It's unconscionable what's happening in the country right now.
Right.
And I feel like, listen, the system is rigged, and I'm a kid from Brooklyn. Mom's a nurse. Dad was a bartender who owned a bar. They lost all their money when I was 17. I had to fend for myself since then. I figured it out. I got lucky. I hacked my way to some success. I got lucky 7 or 8 times. And I wanted to share a little bit of that story of how I did it.
Right.
And I hope other people read it, deploy it, and become wealthy. That is sincerely and truly my goal. I don't need to sell books. The book is super cheap. It's $10 for an Audible book, or $20. Books are the greatest value in the world. And so I just sincerely hope people read it and get some value from it, and some number of them either are able to raise money for their startup easier, or learn to be more successful from it, or learn to be angel investors and learn the craft. And you can do it without money.
Right.
My first gigs as an angel investor, I'm using air quotes for people listening, was as an advisor. I traded my skill in PR and marketing to a company called 0 Degrees, which was a business networking before LinkedIn. I made $16,000 when it sold as an advisor.
Right.
Then I went on the board of savings.com and helped them with social media and blogging. And when they sold, I made $125,000. And my wife was like, she was here a minute ago. She was like, you're making $100,000 a year and you just did 12 board meetings over 3 years and got $125,000. That's like for 20 hours of work. It's like a half a week of work. I was like, well, it's kind of more. It was like double that. She's like, so 40 hours of work. I said, yeah. She goes, be on more boards. Be an advisor in more companies. You can easily trade your skills to be an advisor. And then I was on the board of Dyn, the DNS routing company, and they sold to Oracle, and I made $400,000 or $500,000 from being on the board of that company. So it just went up, 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 up. And there were 2 or 3 that wound up being 0. But that's how I got some of my first cheddar to kind of put to work. If you're sitting here and you're a developer or a designer or a sales executive where you have some skills, you could trade those with a startup. So you can go to 5 startups if you're a designer and say, I look at, and you can just watch them on AngelList. And if you see the ones I'm investing in on Crunchbase or Cyan Bannister or Kevin Rose or Sequoia, whoever is like you think is a good investor, Y Combinator, whatever it is, and they raised $1 million or $500,000. You say, hi, I'm a designer. I saw your website, I saw your logo. I thought it was solid, but not great. I designed a great one for you. It took me 10 hours. I would like to do your design work for the next year. I'd like to give you this as a free gift. Maybe you can give me credit for it, or I could put it on my LinkedIn page. But I'd like to give you this for free. But I would like to trade you $25,000 a year in my design services in exchange for $25,000 in equity at your first round, at your recent round's valuation. If you do that with 20 people, you'll get 5 of them.
Right.
This is the kind of hustle that could make you rich. Mm-hmm. There were people who did this with Uber and Airbnb. Right. They traded services for equity. Right. Most times it will be a 0, but you only need to be right once, as my good friend Mark Cuban told me. And I've been right 7 times. That's why I got to write the book, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not the smartest kid in the class. I was a 71-year, 3-year average, but I was the most dogged in my adult life. I was the most dogged. After my family lost all their money and I was on my own, I had to be dogged. If you're dogged and you have those skills and you just hustle and you just put out help for people, you're a sales executive. You go tell somebody who's starting an enterprise company, I see you have 3 sales jobs open. Mm-hmm. I rewrote the job descriptions because what you're actually looking for is an SDR, and here's the skills they need, and I put it in bullet points for you. And for your senior execs, I don't recommend hiring a senior exec. I would hire 3 junior level people who you think have potential, and I would get them equity, and I wouldn't put a director in yet. I would see which one of those could maybe move up to director position to be more efficient for you, and the directors don't do any direct selling, so what you're really looking for is somebody who's an up-and-comer. If I got that email when I was starting a company, I'd be like, who are you and when can we have coffee? Like, that's just a snap yes, right? But people don't hustle. And that's why they don't take risk. You have to be willing to take risk if you want to have an outsized return. You have to be willing to hustle, and you have to be willing to put in more effort. Right. So look to the left and look to the right. When you're sitting here in Draper University, if somebody's coming in before you and that same person is staying in after you, they're going to beat you in all likelihood. When I was starting my career, I looked to the left, I looked to the right. I said, I'm coming in before my boss, and I would never leave my office until my boss left. You know what happened? My boss went by my desk 3 times. And on the 3rd time, was when I was 21 years old. He said, what are you doing here? And I looked on my desk, and I just didn't want to leave before him. And I picked up the first book I saw was Novell Networking, and I said, I'm trying to get my Novell, I'm just brushing up on Novell Networking. It wasn't true. I was just sitting there, like, doing some work, but I was like, I'm just trying to be better at Novell Networking. He's like, oh, that's great. Did you eat dinner yet? No, I didn't eat dinner. He goes, you want to get dinner with me? I said, sure. This is my boss's boss, Mike Savino. And I went around the corner in Manhattan with him, I had dinner. Now I'm having dinner with my boss's boss. We became lifelong friends. He got me my next 2 or 3 jobs. Now he's a venture partner with my firm. So he brings me deals. Right. This is 25 years later, or 20 some odd years later. He became my mentor. He taught me everything I know about business, or almost everything I know, how to be a hustler, how to close deals, all because I refused to leave the office until he did. Right. That's what's missing, and that's why if you're listening to this and you're not successful yet, you're probably not refining your skills enough, and you're probably not working hard enough. I hate to be the one to bring it up, but you got to take a deep look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I adding skills every year? What do I know this year that I didn't know last year? Who has learned a tangible, awesome skill in the past year? Raise your hand and be honest, you have learned a tangible, okay, it's about half the audience. For the other half, let's get moving. Let's get to work. Let's take the work seriously. You have to do the work. Nothing is promised to you, nothing is given to you, and it's a massively competitive world. If you got a participation trophy, they lied to you. You get ungats, nothing, nada, and 0 for showing up. You're entitled to 0 for showing up. You have to do the work. And man, I meet with 20 founders a week, and half of the time I'm just so inspired, and the other half of the time I'm just shaking my head. This person is literally walking into a freeway. They have no idea. They got blinders on and they're just walking in front of a train. Like, I have no idea how hard this is. They have no skills, they have no hustle, and they expect, oh, I'm going to start working when you give me an investment. What? No investor wants to invest in somebody who's going to start the work when they get a check. We want to feel like the train's leaving the station, you got a rocket ship, you're getting work done with or without our dollars.
Thank you. No, that's amazing. And you guys, get to work. Come on. It actually was very easy on my part. You answered almost everything without me asking, so thank you so much for that.
I apologize.
No.
I'm fired up.
No.
I'm really excited.
I love it. Guys, you all are going to get a copy of the book. And
are they really?
Yeah.
Oh, do they all work here? Or do they all work out of here?
They all actually, so half of them actually are going through our summer cohort.
I'm going to come back, because I live in Hillsborough, right up the block. I'm going to come back one day and sign them all. So after you get them, pick a day, and I'll come by for a burger and autograph everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be great.
It felt so good today. I was at PayPal, and they had like copies of the book, and I got to sign like 70 copies of the book, and I just thought, I like being an author.
We're getting early copies, so we've been working with your publisher to get them earlier than everybody else does. So that would be even better.
You know, it's like, it took me 19 days to write the book, 2 or 3, maybe 3,000 words a day. And as I was writing it, I was like, this is really fucking hard. Like, it's hard. It's arduous. But then I was writing it with my best friend, Brian Alvey. I was writing it, he was reading it, actually. He was like my coach. I wrote the whole thing. And the HarperCollins was like, so we paid you this huge advance. We won the auction. There was an auction for the book. So tell us about what you think your process is going to be for writing the book. I was like, well, I'm going to write the book. They're like, that's great. When do you want to publish it? I was like, when it's a bestseller. They're like, awesome answer. We love that. Do you think you want some help? I was like, how so? They're like, well, you know, sometimes when people write books, we give them somebody to help them with the book. I was like a ghostwriter? They're like, well, we call them like assistants or helper. I think, you know, this like, I was like, fuck no, I'm writing this shit myself. I'm a writer. I'm not writing. And they're like, okay. And I could tell they're like really nervous because they paid me a lot of money and they're not sure if it's going to come out well. And I said, I can tell you're kind of nervous about this. How about I write 5 chapters? You read it, you tell me if you like it. I write the first 5 chapters. And you read the book. I just said to myself, go full Jason, like 100% candid. Just no filter, super candid. If you ever listen to my podcast, sometimes I get a little candid or blunt, or maybe you follow me on Twitter. And I said, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to be super candid. It's worked for my whole career. So I wrote it, and Hollis emailed me, and then she called me. And it was, 10, 11 o'clock at night in New York, and 6 or 7 o'clock here. And she's like, I just want to tell you, I didn't think you could necessarily write a book this good. You have such a unique voice. It's a page turner. Just finish the book. It's going to be amazing. I would never let a ghostwriter write anything for you. It's just like you have an amazing voice or whatever. It's so honest. I was like, great. Then I finished the book, and then I get a phone call. Hey, we got the rest of the book. It's really good. I'm on the call with our general counsel, and our general counsel would like to speak to you. I'm like, okay. Well, there's about 17 people mentioned in the book in a derogatory or unflattering light who will probably sue you and us by extension. So what do you think we should do? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not a publisher, but the stories are all true. Damn the torpedoes, let's go. I had to tell the truth. They're like, well, there is another option that we could put on the table other than fending off 17 lawsuits from people that you told terrible stories about. I said, what's that? I said, change the names. I was like, not changing the names, no way. And then I talked to my wife. She's like, why would you want to go to war with 17 people when you could just change the names and make them a composite? It doesn't add anything to the book. You already have 7 active wars with people. Like, do you really need to have 25? And I was like, God, you're right. Enemies accumulate, right? Like, they just accumulate, right? And so I was like, okay. So then Brian and I went to the book. We changed everybody's name. We changed all the companies. We changed what they did. Stories are all true. And you read the stories.
Yeah. That's how it became food right now.
There were some brutal stories in there. Yeah. Which one is the most brutal, do you think? We'll see if she read the book.
The guy you called an asshole and fought with.
Okay.
And sold on you.
Oh, that was brutal.
Yeah. I was literally oh, okay. And there was a few places in the book when they've just started
This was in my crazy years. I'll tell the story briefly.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was raising money for Mahalo, which is now Inside.com. And Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and Mark Cuban all agreed to invest. I had 3 term sheets essentially. So I went with Sequoia. No dig to Kleiner, just who wanted to work with Sequoia, specific partner there, Ruloff. And right as I'm about to close, one of my angel friends says, hey, Acme Ventures heard you have a term sheet. They want to talk to you. I was like, it's closed. I'm signing the term sheet this week. He said, well, can you do me a favor? It's a good friend of mine. I'm an advisor. It would make me look good if you took the meeting. So, okay, I take the meeting. I take the meeting with Acme Ventures. That's not their name. Guy says, this is amazing. We'll beat Sequoia's term sheet significantly, like by millions of dollars, and we'll give you millions more. Will you just meet with our partnership? I was like, I don't, it's great, thank you, but I don't feel like going back to Sequoia and saying, no, I already kind of verbally agreed, and that's my dream investor. They're the #1 venture firm. They did Apple, Cisco, YouTube, Google, the list goes on, PayPal. And so he goes, just please come to the partner meeting. I said, okay, I'll come to the partner meeting. I was living in Los Angeles. So this is before Uber, before Wi-Fi on flights. I come up on Southwest. I take the 6 a.m. flight, which I got to get up at 4:30. I get to the airport at 5. You guys have done this. This is when I was hustling, not living the cush life I live now. I was like super hustling, not watching any TV.
You're still super hustling.
I kind of hustle, but I do go to Coachella and Burning Man now. I'm getting old. There's only so many Coachellas left in my future of Burning Man. I saw Lorde and Lana Del Rey in the same night. I mean, kind of hard to beat that.
I don't listen to music either, so
Okay.
I have no idea what that is.
Anyway, so I land, and my BlackBerry says there's a message, but I'm like racing to this 9 a.m. partner meeting. I get my Hertz. This takes time at the airport. I'm driving. So I plug my phone in. I put it on speaker. Hey, Jason, it's Joe from Acme Ventures. I hate to cancel on you same day, but I talked to my partners, and they said, it's not a fit for us. I am so embarrassed, but you don't have to come up today. I'm like, I am just, and in my younger days, I was a little bit wild. So I do what any rational person would do. I go to his office. After he says, you don't need to come to the office. I show up at the office. I walk in. There's a big glass room. This is a reception. There's a glass room. I walk in. I smile. I see the guy, just like you right there. I look at him. He looks at me just like you're looking at me. All the partners look at me and then look at him. He comes running out. The woman says, do you have a meeting? I said, yeah, I'm meeting with Joe. She goes, oh, I don't have that here. Joe comes out. Didn't you get my message? I said, oh, I got your message. You are a beep, 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 beep. He's like, I know. I said, let me tell you how stupid you are. This is like, as insane as I was, it's embarrassing, but I had this thing where if somebody was stupid, I felt it was my moral obligation to explain to them in detail how stupid they were. Now, if I meet somebody stupid, I'm like, oh my God, it was so great meeting you. I'm just looking at you like, I don't think you're stupid. Just picking a random person. I'm like, oh my God, it was so great meeting you. Let's keep the dialogue open. You have my email. Let's stay in touch. Put me on your monthly update or whatever. If you say, oh, just let me know about deal flow. No, it's great meeting. And then I turn around and go, that guy's a fucking idiot. I'll lose my number. I would never say it to somebody's face. But back then I felt obligated. So I said, let me tell you how stupid you are. You're so dumb that you didn't realize that you could have invited me to pitch the partnership, told me I am a brilliant founder, let me know that one of your partners is a complete curmudgeon jerk off and he refuses to invest because he thinks it's a conflict with this other company, even though it's not, or any number of excuses. But instead, you wasted my time as a second tier venture firm that I was doing a favor to. You are a complete moron. I'm going to tell, and I just like, and he's like, let me take you to sushi. I was like, I wouldn't let you buy me lunch in 10 lifetimes. I am going to tell every founder I meet what a colossal beep, 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 beep you are. And I walked out. And I saw the guy like a year later at like the D conference, and he came up to me and I said, no. And he said, okay. And he turned around and walked away. And I'm not happy about that story. Like, I think back on it like, wow, that was not the right way to handle it. But I do think, in my own defense, that as a founder, you can be abused. And you have to have a certain amount of pride, and you have to hold your ground when people try to bully you or push you around. And you have to have a sense that you are worthy. No matter if you're, and I was an outsider at the time, I'd never raised venture capital before. But I do think you have to have pride in what you do, and you have to stand your ground, and not be willing to be bullied by people who just because they write a check think they have some dominance over you. You have to be able to look people in the eye and say, you know what, Jason, I think you're a great investor. You're not the right investor for me. I don't like your approach to this. You have to have that ability to be strong and confident and have your own North Star and not be pushed around, even after you take money. I see a lot of investors start telling founders what to do after they've invested. And I say to the founder, is that the right idea? Why are you doing this? And they're like, well, because this person told me to do it. And I'm like, is that really the right reason to do it? Do you in your heart believe this is a good idea? They're like, no, but the investor told me to do it. And I'm like, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't listen to your investors, including me. Take all their information in, write it down, and then be your own true North Star. You know this business better than anybody. Make your own decision. I call that founder pinball. A lot of founders get money from 5 or 6 investors and they just start banging them all over the place.
Right.
It's really, you know your business better than the investors. The investors will be able to tell you where the pitfalls are and how you'll screw up and where the landmines are and what you need to get to the next phase. But you really have to be willing to pursue your own vision.
Mm-hmm. So talking about these brutal stories, now that I'm thinking about it, Twitter was brutal.
Yeah, that was self-inflicted.
That was self-inflicted brutal, but so...
I passed on investing in Twitter.
So if there was something that...
And Zynga.
Yeah.
And Eventbrite. 50 million, 25 million, $10 million mistakes.
Right.
Don't feel bad, I hit 6 unicorns.
Yeah, but since Twitter made it into the book, and your conversation with them also made it into the book, was there anything that they could have said differently in retrospect that would have maybe made you change your mind?
At that point in time, I believed that the job of an investor was to figure out if this was a good idea.
Okay.
I don't believe it's the job of the investor to figure out if your idea is going to succeed. Mm-hmm. The job of an angel investor or a venture capitalist is to understand if you're going to succeed.
Right.
So I have divorced myself from my ability to pick the winning ideas or the winning products.
Right.
I pick the winners, not the products, not the markets. Airbnb, I didn't have an opportunity to invest, but I thought Airbnb was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. I'm going to let a stranger sleep on my couch. Who's going to get up in the middle of the night and light this place on fire? Or I'm going to sleep on somebody's couch who, when I'm asleep, is going to murder me. This is insane. How many people in this room have stayed in Airbnb? Raise your hand if you've ever stayed in Airbnb. It's 85% of the room. And we said before that most of these people are under 30. They have no fear of serial killers killing themselves. How many people in the room have hitchhiked? It's about 20%. You people are fucking crazy. I can't get my head around people who would ever hitchhike or stay in an Airbnb. That being said, I am not the market, right? And I have plenty of friends who passed on Snapchat because they didn't understand the utility of it, right? And so you have to say to yourself, I do not have perfect vision into a market. And you have to be willing to say, I'm going to just know if this person's a winner. What I am an expert at this point in my life is looking somebody in the eyes and seeing into their soul and knowing if they're going to give up or not, and if the idea, when they're answering questions,
it does.
I just look in their eyes, and I can see, I have all the tells if this is a meaningful business to them or not, and if it's not a meaningful business, they're probably going to quit when it gets hard, and it always gets hard. That's all I have to do. I just have to figure out if you're indefatigably in love with this idea, if you are going to be dogged, because if you pick the wrong idea, you will pivot. You will learn something and then keep executing and find the gold. And if you don't do it on this business, you'll do it on the next. So now I've invested in a number of founders twice. Raul from Reportive is doing Superhuman. I told him after he sold Reportive, and I made 2 or 3 times my money, and I was very pissed off that they didn't keep going, but he had partners and they sold to LinkedIn, and I was like, this is crazy. We should keep going. He was like, I agree, but my partners want to sell. I said, I'm fine with you selling, Raul, as long as when you have your next company, I am your first phone call. First phone call, put $1 million in, join the board. Same thing happened with Rob May, who did Backupify. He sold, I made 7 times my money. I was like, 7 times, not bad, but I think you have a 700x in you. I said, I'm fine with selling. I want to be the first phone call in the next company. Tala, he came up with this AI company. I'm the first investor. And Josh Williams, Gowalla, same thing. Last Guide, I was the first investor. And he failed at Last Guide. It didn't work out. His partner left. He had some personal family problems. And I actually emailed him, or DM'd him actually on Twitter today, and invited him to come to my Angel Summit even though he doesn't have a company, to come to the founder portion, because I know on his third company he's going to hit a huge $1 billion idea. So I'm going to invest 3 times in Josh Williams, right? I'm investing in the arc of the person. I believe in people. Their individual products, their individual ideas and markets, they matter, but the person matters more. That's the magic. Is this person indefatigable? Will this person give up? Does this person acquire new skills at a rapid pace? Is this person fucking around doing stupid shit with their life, or are they focused on what matters? Mm-hmm. So when you are thinking about how people perceive you, ask yourself, do I look like an idiot on social media? Am I taking pictures of myself in the club every weekend and at Coachella and nonsense? This guy's like, Jason, I'm on your social media. I saw you in the club last weekend. That's true. But the Warriors won the championship, and I was hanging out with Draymond in the club. That's a totally different story. However, you want to make sure people believe. It's a little name drop. I'm entitled, right? Once in a while. Hold on, let me pick that name up. Put it over here. Boom. You have to be willing to put yourself in the bucket of people, and you have to be strategic about it. That you look like a murderer, a killer, somebody who is just going to crush it and never give up. And you are giving out signals constantly that investors are trying to read. Mm-hmm. And your follow-up and your progress, like Mark Suster says, he does the lines, not the dots, but the dots make up the line. Mm-hmm. You want to be that person who a person says, God, they've been at it for 18 months, and look, they made progress. They figured something out. Now I'm ready to invest. Mm-hmm. I knew Travis for 15, maybe 10 years before I invested in Uber. I knew him at Scour, and I knew him at Red Swoosh. I knew Evan through Blogger, Twitter, Odeo, and I invested in Medium. You have a career arc. Act with a deliberate plan for investors to invest in the arc of your 20 or 30 or 40-year career. That's what you're going for. You want people to think, this person does the work, right? Send out the signals of people who do the work. I did that my whole life. People looked at me and said, that's a hard worker. He's not that smart. He's kind of like that kid some people thought I was kind of dopey, to be honest. They were like, he's kind of like dopey, and he's kind of like unabashedly like aggressive and like trying to be something. I was kind of like a running joke maybe in New York in the beginning, but then things started to click for me. And the little kid with the magazines on the rack suddenly had a $12 million company and a 300-page glossy magazine with 75 employees. Right. And oh no, they did not underestimate me then, because I put them on the cover or didn't. Right. I had power, right? And then people, all of a sudden, the little kid with the 16-page photocopy became the impresario who picked the 100 top people and ranked them in a list. Right. And people were begging me to meet with them and have tour to Knicks games with them. It just turns like that, based on your performance. I can't say enough about acquiring skills and focusing on your performance. People are not critical of themselves enough. Right. They don't. I look at myself and think, God, I'm such a shitty investor. I gotta work harder. Right. I was like literally in a meeting today with somebody who runs a hedge fund, and I explained, here's my entire process. Here's how I'm going to invest in the next 200 companies. Tell me how to do it better. He's like, well, you're the best at this right now. Like everybody else retired and called in rich. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I said, you must see something here that would make this work better. Give me something. Right. And he said, let me think about it. And he asked me a couple questions. He's like, well, what about this and what about that? And I was like, well, I did think about that, and here's why I wasn't going to do that, but I didn't think about this. That's a good point, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm 46 years old. I've done 125 investments. I read the book for the audio, for Audible, and there were like 6 or 7 things. I was like, I got to write another book. I have like 6 or 7 things I need to add that I've learned since writing the book. Right. Like you have to constantly be looking at yourself and saying, how can I improve? Mm-hmm. And I don't think people do that enough. Right. Be self-critical. You don't have to be down on yourself, mm-hmm. but you have to be able to look at yourself objectively and say, am I doing a good job at this, right? And how can I be better at my skills? Am I a good leader? And I have a 9-person team. And what I do to the team is when we have our weekly lunch, I say, once every couple of weeks, I'll say, what are we the worst at right now? What are we absolutely terrible at? And they're like, we don't really do paid marketing. I'm like, great. Who would like to make that our number one skill? And somebody raises their hand and says, I'll do it. And somebody who works for me named Troy said, I'll work the next 6 months on paid marketing to get people to know our events, to get to know what we're doing. And he mastered growth and paid marketing in 3 months, changed the entire organization. So what you do is you make a list of everything you're great at. Most people will lean into what they're good at. So for me, I'm good at talking. Okay, great, I'll do another podcast. Well, that doesn't really help the organization. Well, what do I suck at? Well, I've never written a book. Great, let's make the book the best thing we could ever do. So just take whatever you suck at. If you're terrible at sales, you're terrible at public speaking, terrible at hiring people. How many people think they suck at hiring people and struggle with it, like me? Raise your hand if you feel like you suck at it, right? So here's your assignment to the 10 people who admitted it. The other 90, you have open positions in your company, so you're lying. But for the 10 who can admit it, you're on the way. Go talk to 5 people who are founders and say, I'm struggling with hiring people. What's worked for you? Just ask 5 friends if they can talk to you for 20 minutes. Write down what they say, look for the common threads. I did that. I was like, how do we get better at hiring people? One of my friends was like, your job descriptions are cold and they have no personality. Why don't you write it like a blog post? So now when we write job descriptions, we write them in a very fun, personal way. Hi, I'm Jason. I'm the CEO of Launch. We are a company that's mission-based. We want to support founders and inspire innovation. We have a fun time doing what we do, and we love entrepreneurs. If you love entrepreneurs, startups, and technology, you should work with us. We're trying to invest in 30 companies a year and host these amazing events that inspire people to start companies. If that's interesting to you, we have 3 positions open. Why don't you join us for coffee? That's how we wrote the job descriptions. 10 times better candidates. 10 times better. But I had to ask other people for help and to say, hey, what do you do that's working? Who's good at this? Man, people will tell you, this is one of the beautiful things about Silicon Valley. If you ask people for help here, they help you. It's unbelievable, with no expectation of ever getting anything in return. Tim Draper is so crazy rich, he owns every building in San Mateo. And he comes here and he helps all you guys and gals grow your companies. Right. He doesn't need to do this anymore. His sons don't need to do this. They're a bunch of trust fund kids. They're super rich. They don't need to do any of this.
They get mentioned in the book.
They do. I was like, there's only 2. Well, I was like, nobody's born into this industry, except maybe Ron Conway and Tim Draper's kids. But that's it. But even you would think like, oh wow, you know, your dad and your granddad's a venture capitalist. Your dad is the greatest angel investor of all time, Ron Conway. Their kids work harder and take the work super seriously than most investors I know. This is a beautiful, amazing industry where everybody is trying to help each other to succeed. Right. It is one of the great things. So ask people for help and help each other. If you're great at design and your fellow, classmate or entrepreneur is, great at sales, there's a perfect dynamic there. Hey, teach me how to sell. I'll teach you how to design. Mm-hmm. And ask people to be candid with you. Right. Most people are not going to be candid with you. Investors will never tell you the truth. They're going to tell you, you are awesome, your idea, I love you guys. It's not a fit for us now, but let's stay in touch. Send me your monthly updates, and I totally want to check in with you. It was amazing meeting you. Translation, I will never invest at you. I think you guys are schmucks. But that's what they say. Anything other than a yes is a no. Right. Like, unless they ask you for a term sheet, they're not interested in you. Mm-hmm. Only a term sheet matters. Whatever else they say, ignore. Right. There is nothing that matters other than, can we send you a term sheet, or can we see your term sheet? Can we discuss your term sheet? Unless it's at the term sheet level, assume it's not going to happen. And then what you do is, here's the big hack. Say, Jason, it was a great meeting. I know you're not going to invest right now. It's not right. You could do me a real service. We're just getting started. It's our first startup. Would you be totally candid with me and tell me the 3 things I need to work on? When I have a founder do that, and most founders would never do that, I just tell them, like, are you sure you want to take the red pill, not the blue pill? Because the red pill, the matrix is pretty ugly. Like, it's an ugly place. But I'll tell you, and then there's like, yes. And I say, okay, this design is a 5 out of 10. Your business model has been tried before. It never worked. You guys have no experience and no skills. Come back with skills. One of you learn how to be a developer. One of you learn how to be a designer. Get this from a 5 to an 8.5 in terms of design. That'll take $5,000 or $10,000 in 6 months or 3 months if you're working on it really hard. And let's come up with a business model where you're not afraid to make money, and your answer to how you make money isn't, we're going to sell our data. And we're going to license our software, and we'll have an enterprise version, and we're going to do merchandising, and we're going to sell ads, and we'll have subscriptions. Like literally, somebody answered a question that way to me. I was like, I think you just listed every business model possible. Which one is it? They're like, yes. I'm like, no. You can't have 6 business models. Facebook makes money through advertising. Google makes money through advertising. Airbnb and Uber and eBay take a piece of the transaction. It's very simple. You're either taking a cut of the action, you're either advertising based or subscription based. It's very Netflix. We have subscriptions. Any other way you make money? What do you mean? What's the second way you make money? Well, we make so much money from the primary way. Why would we need a second? That's the answer to the question. Oh, how does Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp make money? Advertising. Any other ways? We're printing money. Why would we need another way? So there's all these tells. I talk about it in the book. I hope you read the book. If you do read the book, I will come back and sign them. I know that you guys want to ask questions maybe.
Yeah, so...
A couple of questions, or we have no time?
We'll take 3 questions. How are you on time?
I live up the block, so I have an unlimited amount of time, I think. I think my daughter might be eating sushi right now, so I'm going to take her for... let me just check my messages. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming out here. And
It's my pleasure, Nick.
thank you. You spoke a lot about democratizing investments to the community. So
I hope.
I was just wondering what your views are on the current trends in initial coin offerings in the blockchain space.
Okay. Bancor is a Draper company that was at the launch festival. And are they in the room? Anybody from Bancor in the room? Okay. So we'll get super candid. I didn't understand the idea exactly. It was like, oh, Bancor is for people to do ICOs, right? That was the basic idea?
I won't get into it, but more or less.
So a company that does ICOs has raised $150 million in ICOs to do ICOs. I think the SEC is going to be knocking on their door at any minute. And I think that a lot of the companies who are doing it are companies that didn't get venture. And so to me, it looks, there's a lot of red flags. The SEC has a very specific concept. If it looks like a security, if people think it's a security, if some portion of people think it's a security, I can't speak for the SEC, but I know that when it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it might be a duck. So it feels like equity to me. And the people who are investing in it for a return, not for the utilization of it. If the people investing in it, whether it's Bancor or any of these, are investing in it to see the coin appreciate, it's going to be viewed as a security. And if you don't know who bought the coins, which people don't know who bought the coins, it's a mystery, right? It's anonymous. If you don't know who bought the coins, how do you know ISIS or the mafia or money laundering people or whoever have bought the coins? We have financial regulations in this country for a reason, and it's a serious reason. Money laundering, tax evasion, etc. These ICOs, to me, seem ripe for abuse. If they are ripe for abuse and they look like equities and people are buying them for that reason, this is not going to end well. Now, as an entrepreneur and an investor, I look at the technology and say, wow, my friend Brock Pierce is doing an ICO for a fund. And if I could, in my next fund, if I did a next fund, say, anybody can buy, I'll take 5 million of it and sell it to people. And then, or anybody who buys my fund, if it was all an ICO, the LPs would have liquidity and be able to actively trade my angel investing. This would be miraculous. So it does seem amazing to do this, but we have regulations in this country which are deadly serious. And I can tell you that the regulatory organizations in our country are humorless. And they are not apt to debate your interpretation. They're going to take the strictest interpretation. So if you are thinking of doing this kind of stuff, you better be buttoned up and you better be prepared. I would not spend that money, and I would be prepared for a visit, and I would be prepared to give that money back or settle with the SEC. Be careful. You're in the ICO business?
Yes.
Have you done an ICO yet?
No, we're in the process of doing it right now. We're
So-
looking at different domiciles, Switzerland, Singapore, Papua New Guinea.
Listen, and if you're here and the shareholders of your company are here and you put a shell over there, that doesn't mean
Doesn't matter.
it does not matter. So this is another misconception people have, is that like, well, if you're an American, you are bound by American law.
Right.
And if you go to another country and you bribe somebody, if bribes are okay in that country and bribes are not okay here, you will be brought to justice here for bribing people. So in Germany, a bunch of Germans, I remember reading about it not too long ago, were bribing people in the Philippines or some place, Indonesia, I don't know where it was. It was some place where it's kind of traditional to give people 10 grand under the table to consummate a deal. And yeah, they all went to jail in Germany because they were bribing. They were not representing German citizens well abroad. You need to be super careful. I do think it's promising. I am intrigued. I would like to see the SEC make a comment. They have yet to make a comment, correct?
They will likely be making a comment in the fall of this year.
The fall of this year. So the question is, do you want to put yourself, your investors, at risk between now and then? I don't think there's a rush to do this. And there is obviously some sort of a gold rush, but it seems very speculative to me that 30 or 50 or $100 million is showing up, and that some of that money is not in some way tainted or manipulated. And I can tell you this, Bitcoin is probably the most manipulated currency. Here's a story for you. If you and I owned, let's say, I don't know, $10,000 in Bitcoin 5 years ago, is now worth $100 million each or $10 million each, and we wanted to sell it at maximum value. And let's say over the last 5 years, we created hundreds of thousands of wallets. And you and I, with these hundreds of thousands of wallets, each created every day randomly at random times from random IP addresses all over the world. It'd be pretty easy for a developer in this room to do that. They could probably script it in a couple of hours. And then we randomly created a script that sent volume back and forth because it is free to transfer. And now we're sending random amounts from random places, whipping $100 million in Bitcoin to create volume. This would make it seem like Bitcoin is a very viable currency, wouldn't it?
Sure would.
Let's say if we're in China and we've got all these Bitcoin miners on hydroelectric dams where we got the money for free and we're manipulating it, and the rule of law is not as stringent as here, and we're trading hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin, and then the price goes from 200 to 2,000, and we sell a little bit as it goes, and then we stop selling our Bitcoins to each other, and the volume goes down, and everybody gets nervous and sells all the Bitcoins. It goes down to $200, and then we do it again, and it goes back up to 2,000, or it goes up to 1,200 the first time, goes to 200, comes back to 2,700, which is what it did.
That's exactly. Yeah.
Does it not seem plausible that some group of people who have anonymity and who can create unlimited number of untraceable accounts could do something like that? Well, they can. And the one thing I've learned about human nature is that because I'm a gambler, if people can get an edge, they will get an edge. If a system can be hacked, it has been hacked. Not will be hacked, it has been hacked.
So I very much appreciate that answer, and it's very clear that the utility of a lot of these projects are far disjoint from the actual market value. One of the, I guess, small follow-up questions that I have in this respect is the actual fundamental technology of some of these things is quite groundbreaking, yet there's clear regulatory hurdles in the future that are looking to stifle these in particular geographic regions.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what would be then the middle ground on the regulator side to still tame something like this, but allow it to expand and allow it to grow in the real value that it can create.
If you look at non-accredited investors investing, it took the SEC, I think, 3 years, a process of getting public feedback and going back and forth. And this, I don't know when the Jobs Act happened, but it might have been 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, when Obama was president. And May and June is when they started doing it. So it sounds like it's a 2 or 3 year process. With, what's that?
3.5 years ago.
3.5 years ago, Job. So it took them 3 years probably to get that done, or 2.5, 3 years. So I think it's a 2 or 3 year process where they will solicit feedback. People will have to be SEC compliant. There'll have to be some regulations. If I buy this coin and I want to redeem it, or if you spend the money, if you raise $150 million and you have no audit, should you be able to raise $150 million from citizens without knowing who they are and with no audit. Well, if you raise $1 million, you need to have an audit. So I think you should have an audit. So if Bancor raises 150 million, they should have to audit that spend and put it out there, and maybe give a period in which people can redeem the money back. If they change their mind, they get cold feet, especially if they're non-accredited, not sophisticated investors. And they probably have to clear some hurdle of, if people are buying it overseas, that we know that they're not using it to take money from a rogue government or a rogue organization or a billionaire who wants to support terrorism. How do we know that somebody didn't just buy a bunch of Bancor coins, transfer them to somebody else who then sold them, and then that person who sold them is going to blow up a building? We don't. You could be funding all kinds of terrorists with this stuff. And I'm not saying that to be alarmist, but bad people in the world, bad actors, are going to abuse these systems. They've abused every system. They abuse the postal mail. People are sending deadly heroin from China. What do they call it? Fentanyl? Something like this? It's supposed to be 1,000 times stronger than heroin. These 2 kids who are 15 years old died in Salt Lake City. They bought fentanyl off the internet for $50 on the dark web. 1 kid gave it to 2 kids. The 2 kids took it. They died instantly from some crazy super heroin from China. We are living in a William Gibson novel at this point. People are buying shit on the dark web. Kids are taking it and dying. Bad stuff happens when you have anonymous systems that are untraceable. Other times, anonymity is beautiful, but we as a society have a lot of work to do in figuring this stuff out and regulating it. Because random money moving around is very dangerous. And I'm a libertarian. I believe people should be able to take drugs if they choose to. I believe that you should be able to buy these drugs in a drugstore and have it regulated and make sure people aren't taking bad doses and let them get help. And then maybe they sign a waiver like, I agree, I don't want help right now, but if I do want help, I can walk next door and go into an opioid clinic. But people are going to take drugs, so you got to figure out a better way to deal with it. But boy, this ICO stuff, when I see stuff like this, I get very nervous. People are going to go to jail, I predict.
Yeah, honestly, for somebody who's not in the space, you're scarily on point. And I'll end with that. Thank you very much.
I read.
So we have time for 2 more questions.
All right.
Can you just
I'll answer
line
quickly.
up behind them so we can do
Yeah, line up. Yeah, good idea.
Right. Thank you, Jason. It seems to me that reading people is one of your biggest strengths as an angel investor.
Correct.
But reading people really sometimes is really difficult things to do. Do you bring this from like playing poker? Or,
Yes.
And what kind of qualities you train yourself about reading people with poker playing?
Well, with poker, you have partial information, and you're studying somebody over a number of hands and how they behave. And, for some people, you're wearing $200 shoes, and your name is Xiaolin?
That's right.
Xiaolin? Shanghai? Taiwan? Where are you from?
Chengdu.
Okay.
In China as well.
Yeah. And I can start the reading process already. Short hair, very tight, expensive glasses, care very much about how you look. You're diligent. You probably sleep 6 hours a night or less, and you read a lot. I can stop whenever you tell me I'm wrong, but tell me if I'm wrong on any of that. Did I get any of that wrong?
You're almost right. That's stuff.
I can keep going.
Yeah.
You are wearing a perfect sweatsuit in a business event. You would only wear a sweatsuit in a business event if you had a massive degree of confidence in your ability. It's a bold choice, and you've had the pants hemmed. You don't hem sweatsuit pants unless you are very detailed. Those aren't cuffed up. You had them hemmed, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like me to continue?
Well, that's good. I really want to learn from you, like from a secret, like how do you want to read people? Because
You have to come to Dagobah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to read the book.
No, Dagobah. Yoda.
Okay.
It's Jedi training. You have to be careful because a lot of Jedis, they lose a hand. You have to be willing to lose a hand. It's very serious stuff. But anyway, over years of being present and being perceptive and hearing, what people say and what they don't say, how they dress, their mannerisms, how they follow up. You see patterns, you learn patterns, right?
Yeah, that's the same as poker.
Yeah, same as poker, right?
Thank you.
If you get your hair cut every 5 weeks. I could keep going.
$40 to old ladies.
Okay, hiking shoes. 10-year-old jeans.
20. Practicing for survival week for Draper. So when the Apple board fired Steve Jobs, everyone was cheering for the board. When the Uber board kind of forced Travis to get fired, or he resigned, everybody's now cheering for the Uber board. Do you think he will ever go back? Is there a chance? Or if he calls you now and says, I got this new idea and I want to start a business, would you be the first one to write the check?
So it's an interesting analogy or an interesting observation. It's a very challenging situation. I would absolutely be the first investor and will be the first investor in Travis's next company if he chooses to do one. I will race with that check to give it to him. He is one of the great entrepreneurs of our time. And will he come back to Uber? I hope so. I think it's very easy to look at all the mistakes and virtue signal and say, bad, 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 bad. You should never be able to improve as a human. But we all improve, right? We all make mistakes and we all improve. I know Travis for 15 years. He's incredibly hardworking. He's always improving himself. I think it was obviously a very difficult situation for everybody. I don't have full insight and information into what happened. And I'm friends with Bill Gurley from Benchmark, First Round, and Chris Sacca, who signed the letter. I'm also very good friends with Travis. It puts me right in the middle. Also, we know that companies that keep their founders do better. And I'm an investor. And so I'm not worried. The team at Uber is tremendous. The revenue is tremendous. The value of the product is amazing. So I think it's going to have a wonderful outcome either way. But I don't know if he should have been ousted or not. I don't know if that was the best solution, especially after the tragedy with his mom. I think letting him complete the leave of absence and then making a decision might have been my choice, but intelligent people can disagree. And those other people have, and Travis agreed to step away. So I have to think that they have better information than me and that my friends, these are all my friends, that they came to a decision together. Because Travis, you have to remember, didn't have to. He had the voting shares, I think, so he could have stayed if he wanted to. But I think they made a collective decision for what's in the best interest of the company at this time.
Maybe after the IPO come back?
Anything's possible. You know, anything's possible. Maybe after an IPO, maybe the company sells, maybe somebody else shepherds it like Eric Schmidt did for Google for 5 years, and then Larry Page took over. So anything's possible. I will say that, you know, I think Travis is a very good person. And I think that he's been treated really harshly, especially in light of what happened with his mom. And I think a little bit of compassion, even though there were mistakes made, and people can be rightfully upset about those things. But I always look at how the person's reacting to the problems. And I think bringing Eric Holder in and making these changes to the board, I believe that that was a very bold decision. And they've taken bold action. So I try to judge people with how they respond to bad situations. And I think the team up and down at Uber is really trying to get it right. And that the overwhelming majority of people at Uber are good people. And that they want to provide a great service and they want to have a great culture, and they will. So I'm rooting for them. I know they're going to succeed because I can tell you, getting these culture issues fixed pales in comparison to what they had to do in terms of effort in building out 700 cities and building the service that we all love. If you can do that, they can solve these other problems. It's within their power to do so, and I think they're halfway there, or maybe they're 2/3 of the way there. So it's a difficult time, and it puts me in a difficult position because I'm an outspoken person. And yes, I could be super critical, but if you're part of the team, I think it's my job to work quietly behind the scenes to try to help. And that's what I did. During this crises, multiple crises in a short period of time, I just tried to spend time with as many people as I could and offer my help and my insight to solve the problems. It would be easier for me to come out and say, I am absolutely outraged about this, I'm absolutely outraged about that. But all that does is give the press the ability to say, angel investor Jason Calacanis hates his founder, hates the company he invested in, and it just, now the company has real work to do solving these very important problems. And now they have to deal with dissension of the investor base, and it just makes even more chaos. And so I elected not to do that. Now some of my friends wrote public letters of how appalled they were. I wrote a tweet, this is not acceptable, it needs to be fixed. I tried to keep it very short because I know how the press works because I was a member of the press. And as a member of the press, I would be all over this. And look, every single publication dedicated an investigative journalist to Uber. And it's insane, like the amount of scrutiny that companies offer has never existed in the history of companies.
Maybe with Elizabeth Holmes, it kind of was the same story.
Yeah, and you know, the difference with Elizabeth Holmes is there was never a real business there. And it was a deranged way of handling the company never being able to release a product. There's nobody in this room who is not, I think, largely satisfied with the Uber product, and it's printing money, and it's an incredible success, and it's changed the world in a very good way. With Elizabeth Holmes, they never even released a product, right? And I think most investors in that company feel duped. I can tell you the investors in Uber do not feel duped. They feel like this is an incredible success with mistakes, right? So I think mistakes are different than misrepresentations or fraud. And in the case of Elizabeth and what happened at Theranos, I think it's going to wind up, you know, like she's been banned from testing and doing testing. So I think it's not an analogous situation. And there's a range of situations. Listen, Facebook got a $20 million fine and a 20-year audit from the FTC. Zuckerberg had 3 or 4 of his previous founders at war with him and in lawsuits. He had that fake guy who claimed that he owned half of it. That was a bogus lawsuit. So you saw all of these bogus lawsuits and real justified lawsuits and the investigation by the FTC into privacy, the settlement, the fines, all of this stuff. And then eventually, you know, Facebook kind of matured and they worked through a lot of these problems. Steve Jobs, same thing. Steve Jobs had many problems. He had a hard time working with people. People wouldn't work for him, and you know, it wound up resulting in his exile and then his triumphant return. And so I don't know if it's perfectly analogous here, but I am hoping, and I'm rooting for Travis, and I'm certainly rooting for the entire company. It's a significant portion of my net worth, but I'll be fine. I have 5 other, you know, unicorn investments, so I know that it can seem like I'm talking up my portfolio, but the truth is I root for all of my founders, and you know, part of the role I'm in now is to help guide them when there are mistakes. So I try to be a bit of an elder statesman, and the story I told before of me being arrogant and telling stupid people what I really think and stuff like that, I kind of have left that behind. I was kind of Jason 1.0, and now I try to be an elder statesman. I try to really be considered in how I think about things. I don't always succeed, but I am trying to be that person. And I think you see that with a lot of people, you know, judging people in their 20s. I mean, look at Evan Spiegel, and his emails he wrote were horrific, and when he was a frat guy, he was just a huge jerk. And now he's really being considered and trying to build a company. You know, people get started very young in our industry. They go through tremendous stress and pressure. As we've talked about, some people kill themselves, sadly. Like I've seen that happen twice up close with Jody and with Cambrian Technologies. And it's just like, this is a pressure cooker. People make mistakes. And, you know, I think we have to have a little bit of tolerance for people evolving while still demanding a high level, right? And it's a very challenged position as an investor because you don't have control of the company, but you do have some influence, right? And we live in a world where, you know, between Twitter and Facebook and TV, if people make a mistake, man, the rage cycle is harsh. And the only good thing is, even though the rage is 10 times more than it's ever been, or 100, it lasts for half as long. So we seem to be moving as a society from outrage and outrage to outrage, and there's really systematic, important problems we have to solve, and rage doesn't solve them. Rage doesn't solve the problems that Donald Trump is creating right now. The rage actually does very little. Deliberate action, people running for office, people investigating if there's wrongdoing with the Russians. Like, there are specific things we can do that actually are meaningful to solve our problems. And one of the problems in our society, I believe, is we're so polarized and yelling at each other that we're not looking at solutions, right? I wish that politics and politicians were based on their ability to implement solutions and their ability to bring together innovation. If I run for mayor, mayorjason.com, which was a joke that's now turned into something that's only half a joke, my platform is going to be innovation. And all of us looking at what is the best possible solution for housing, what are the best possible solutions for rapid transit, and let's have a candid discussion about how innovative we want to be and how we're going to fund these in an innovative way. Not which side is right or wrong, or these politics and culture, politics of culture. We need to really solve big problems. And things like global warming, this cannot be a religious battle. It has to be a battle of action. And science and action and deliberate, execution on solutions, and then monitoring those solutions and having a candid discussion about the data, just like you do at a company. We can't just randomly, haphazardly solve global warming, problems around migration and immigration, food. These are problems that transcend one country or one political party. It's really a dangerous moment in society. There's a chance that we will not make it through this next set of problems because the problems are so global in nature and the world is so broken into factions that I'm very concerned. Because factions are not going to solve this problem. It's not that one side is right and one side is wrong. It's that we all have to collaborate on solving these problems. They can't be done by one country. That's why we had the Paris Accord. And then we left it. And like the only other people that left the Paris Accord was what? Venezuela and Syria. Wow, two bastions of democracy and innovation and prosperity. I mean, these are two of the most fucked up countries in the world, and we're going to join them in the list of like just not giving a shit. It's no offense to people from Venezuela, but I mean, we know how fucked up it is there right now, right? Like it's a disaster. And Syria is obviously in chaos. We're putting ourselves on the list of chaotic countries. I mean, it's people should absolutely be scared right now. Great question.
Elon Musk to do his Mars spaceship and maybe the one.
Listen, I think a really good strategy for the next 10 years might be to bring the top 10 problems we have to Elon Musk and just have him write a white paper. Like, honestly, if he wrote a white paper, like, we should just literally bring him, like, global warming, what should we do? And just Elon writes, like, okay, electric cars, solar, and this. And we just take it and we go execute it. I mean, he's brilliant. He's a good friend of mine. Like, we should just trust him with, like, Elon, what should we do about education? He's like, oh, I think we should do this. Great. His solution is absolutely going to be better than any faction's politicized solution. Last question.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Trevor. I'm a college student, and
Where do you go to school, Trevor?
I go to Johns Hopkins.
Whoa, you gonna be a doctor? Your mom wants you to be. I sound like your mom now, huh? Are you gonna be a doctor? Make the family proud.
With all due respect, I've heard that question so many times. So one question that I had.
Yeah.
But is that a yes or a no?
No, I'm not a.
But your mom wants you to be, or dad.
How did you know? So one big question that I had that a lot of college students my age is asking is, with the emergence of artificial intelligence and machine learning, where do you see the need for human input? Because, college students like me are trying to get a job, and it's tough because, engineering students and comp sci students are getting the most number of love calls, but it seems that other majors are having a hard time.
Sure. The world needs intelligent people who can learn new skills, right? And of course, computer science and some of these skills are the most in demand. But when I look at startups, a great hack is being a product manager. Product managers are diligent, hardworking, and are able to keep the chessboard in their brain, let's say, right? If you can learn to be a product manager, and if you go to Johns Hopkins, I think it will take you about 2 weeks to learn how to be a product manager. It's literally going to be one of the easiest things you've done. If you learn how to do wireframes, and then you find a CEO who's got a lot of crazy ideas, right? Maybe Ben from Butterfly in the back, and you say, I want to be your product manager. and you start writing up the wireframes. He tells you ideas, you mock them up, you bring them to you. And then you learn growth. These are two critical functions in every startup. The person who can design the product and the person who comes up with techniques to grow the product. And then, the most dangerous of all, cross-disciplinary people. People who can design product and do growth. This is your future. You promise you'll do it? Say, okay. Trust me. Go learn to be a product manager. Download Balsamic or other wireframes. Wireframe a website or an app that you already love. So let's say you love calm.com, you love to meditate. I'm an investor in that company, they've done very well. Take calm.com, redesign it. Redesign 3 features. Go look at other companies that have great features. Think to yourself, what features could I add to calm.com that'd be interesting? And you say, group meditation. Right now it's all solo, but group meditation would be powerful. Wireframe out group meditation. And then add to it a growth hack. Okay, a growth hack would be loading your address book or loading your Twitter list and the friends who you've interacted with most or who your closest friends are on Facebook. Then have the wireframe be clickable. So you can use, what's the clickable wireframe software that's really good there? InVision, thank you. Use InVision to make a clickable mock-up of calm.com for group meditation. Invite 5 friends, make it look great. They all 5 of them sit in a row, and they all click when they breathe out. The microphone listens for their breath, and it shows their breathing on their name in their avatar going shh, shh. Now you have 5 people and their names are going up and down with the breathing, and then they all try to sync their breathing as they're doing their meditation. And then you submit it to alex@calm.com. And you say, Alex, I heard Jason speak and I used Calm. It was really compelling. I thought you should have a feature in which groups could meditate for the paid version. And if you have 2 people, it's free, but if you want to have over 2 people and you want to meditate with 4 or 5 people, when you come into the app, we'll match you like in a video game. And I play video games, and I copied this matching service, and here's my mock-up. I would love to get coffee with you. I'm looking for a job as a product manager. I would work for free for the first month to show you how much I want the job. Now you've put yourself into every CEO's dream. Somebody who's doing work for them before you've hired them. I've had people do this with me. I hire them. People who show that they care about the product. I was talking to a family member, and they were like, can you introduce me to Gary Vee? I said, I can introduce you to Gary Vee, but the first thing he's going to do is look at your Snapchat, look at your Instagram, look at your Twitter. And I just looked at them. And they're not updated, and they don't have anything to do with what you do, what you want to do for Gary. So why don't you spend 30 days and every day put out some content that is related to things that Gary likes, the Jets, you know, Planet of the Apps, whatever. Make little video remixes, and we're in the process of doing this. And when he gets to 30 days, then I will email Gary and say, hey, my nephew loves what you do. Here is an example of his work. You can see on his social media that he remixed the finals. He remixed the best of the Jets for the last 4 decades, and he did the 70s, 80s, 90s, and he put a little message to you at the end. Now, Gary Vee's like, oh, this is my plan, hopefully. And I get my nephew a job working for Gary Vee. I mean, I could ask Gary Vee to do me a favor, but I would rather have it be that I'm doing Gary Vee a favor by introducing him. So you want to put yourself in the bucket of doers. Are you a doer or are you a talker?
I'm a doer.
Okay. So do the work. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Was this okay?
This was amazing, like really good.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for, just a final request. If you read the book and you like it, please write a review, a detailed review on Amazon and Audible, and tweet it. If you don't like the book, what's your email? Asra at what?
Asra at Draper University.
Email Asra at Draper University about what you don't like about the book. She'll put all those together and she'll give me a specific report on the mistakes I made in the book. But if you like it, please, I want my publisher to make money so that I can write the next book. And the next book is even better. I have a really good idea. But I want to write it next year when I get my energy back, because it's exhausting. But please, please, if you do like the book, pre-order a copy, Audible. Pre-order it. It only costs $10, and it really helps if there's a bunch of pre-orders. And the reviews help most of all. So, and I hope you read it. And you can always email me, jason@calacanis.com, or on Twitter, Jason, or on Instagram, Jason. Follow me. I follow back.
He always replies to his emails.
I try.
I've always gotten a reply, so I don't know.
You write very succinct emails.
Probably 2 sentences, like a sentence, probably.
If an email is more than a paragraph, it's probably a meeting. Right? That's pretty good, actually. Yeah. Keep it short. Short and to the point.